The gunshot echoed across the crowded charity gala, silencing hundreds of conversations in a single terrifying instant. For a moment, nobody moved. Crystal glasses froze halfway to lips. Laughter died. Music stopped, and then she fell. Ava Carter collapsed onto the marble floor, her white dress stained red as she clutched her chest. Standing directly behind her was Ethan Blackwell, a billionaire entrepreneur, philanthropist, and one of the most powerful men in the country. The bullet had been meant for him. Everyone could see it. The shooter had fired from a balcony overlooking the ballroom. The trajectory was obvious. Ethan had been the target, but Ava had stepped into the line of fire, not because she was trained security, not because she was obligated to. She simply saw the glint of the rifle scope a second before anyone else did, and she moved. The room erupted into chaos. People screamed. Security agents rushed toward Ethan while others searched for the shooter. Someone yelled for a doctor. Someone else called an ambulance. But Ethan heard none of it. All he could see was Ava lying on the floor. "Ava," he shouted. Dropping to his knees beside her, he pressed his hands against the wound. Blood soaked through his fingers instantly. "No. No. Stay with me." Ava tried to speak. Her lips moved. No sound came out. Then her eyes slowly closed. For the first time in years, Ethan Blackwell felt completely helpless. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Doctors worked frantically. The bullet had narrowly missed her heart. She was alive, but barely. For the next 16 hours, Ethan never left the hospital. Reporters camped outside. News channels covered the assassination attempt nonstop. The world wanted answers. Who had tried to kill Ethan Blackwell? And why had a young woman risked her life to save him? The truth was complicated, because Ava Carter wasn't just a random guest. She worked for Ethan's foundation. 3 years earlier, she'd joined as a volunteer coordinator. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't famous. Most executives barely noticed her. But Ethan had, not because she sought attention, because she never did. Whenever disaster struck, Ava was there. Whenever families needed help, she stayed long after everyone else went home. She possessed a rare quality that money couldn't buy. She genuinely cared about people. Ethan admired that, though he'd never admitted it. Over the years, a quiet friendship formed between them. One built on mutual respect, nothing more. Or at least that's what Ethan told himself. As dawn approached, a surgeon finally emerged from the operating room. Ethan stood immediately. "How is she?" The surgeon removed his mask. "She's stable." Ethan exhaled, the first full breath he'd taken all night. "But she's still critical. The next 24 hours are important." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." The surgeon left. For several moments, Ethan stared through the ICU window. Machines beeped around Ava's unconscious body, and suddenly a question entered his mind. Why? Why would she sacrifice herself for him? What made someone risk everything for another person? Especially someone like him, a man whose life revolved around boardrooms, negotiations, and billion-dollar deals. A man who spent more time building companies than building relationships. The answer arrived later that afternoon. A nurse handed Ethan a small envelope recovered from Ava's belongings. Inside was a folded letter. It wasn't addressed to him. Curious, he unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Ava's. The words changed everything. "If you're reading this, something probably happened that I couldn't prevent. There's something I've wanted to tell you for years, not because I expect anything in return, but because some truths deserve to be spoken. You once saved my life. You just never knew it." Ethan frowned. Saved her life? He kept reading. 10 years earlier, before Ethan became famous, his foundation had funded emergency housing programs after a devastating storm. One of those families had been Ava's. At the time, she was a teenager, homeless, terrified. Without options, the assistance program had given her family a second chance, a future. Hope Ethan never knew. To him, it had been another charitable initiative. To Ava, it had been survival. The letter continued. "You probably don't remember making that decision, but it changed everything for us. People think kindness disappears when the moment ends. It doesn't. It travels, sometimes for years, sometimes forever. By the time Ethan reached the final sentence, his vision blurred. For the first time he understood, Ava hadn't jumped in front of the bullet because she was reckless. She did it because years earlier, through an act he barely remembered, he'd unknowingly transformed her life. The kindness had come full circle. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Because 3 days later, investigators discovered something shocking. The assassination attempt wasn't random. The shooter had been hired, paid, directed. And when detectives traced the money trail, it led somewhere nobody expected. The order hadn't come from a rival company. It hadn't come from organized crime. It hadn't come from a political enemy. The person behind the hit was someone Ethan trusted completely. Someone who had sat beside him in meetings for years. Someone who knew every weakness in his empire. Someone who had smiled at him while secretly planning his death. When detectives revealed the name, Ethan felt the world shift beneath his feet, because the mastermind behind the attack was his own business partner, the man he'd considered a brother. And the reason was far darker than greed. It was connected to a secret buried 20 years earlier, a secret powerful enough to destroy fortunes, reputations, and entire families. As Ava fought for her life in the hospital, Ethan found himself pulled into a conspiracy he never knew existed. And the closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous everything became. Because whoever wanted him dead wasn't finished. Not yet. Ethan stared at the detective across the table, convinced he had heard wrong. Say that again. Detective Morgan slid a file toward him. Inside were bank transfers, encrypted messages, burner phone records, and surveillance photos. Every piece pointed to one man, Daniel Hayes, Ethan's business partner, his closest friend for nearly 15 years, the man who had helped build Blackwell Industries from a struggling startup into a global empire. "We verified everything 3 times," Morgan said. "The evidence is solid." Ethan felt anger rising inside him. There has to be a mistake. There isn't. Ethan pushed away from the table. Daniel had stood beside him through lawsuits, hostile takeovers, and economic crashes. Daniel knew his family. Daniel knew his dreams. Daniel had toasted every major victory. How could he possibly be the one who wanted him dead? Hours later, Ethan drove to the hospital. He needed answers, but the only person he truly trusted was unconscious behind ICU glass. Ava remained connected to machines, her condition stable but fragile. Ethan sat beside her bed and looked at her pale face. "You saved my life," he whispered. "Now I don't know who I can trust." A faint movement caught his attention. Ava's fingers twitched. Ethan immediately stood. "Ava?" Her eyelids fluttered weakly. A nurse rushed in. Doctors followed seconds later. After several tense minutes, Ava managed to open her eyes. She looked confused at first. Then she saw Ethan. Relief crossed her face. "You're alive," she whispered. Ethan almost laughed. "You took a bullet for me, and that's your first concern?" Ava attempted a smile before pain forced her to stop. The doctors allowed Ethan only a few minutes. Before leaving, he leaned closer. "The police found the person behind the attack." Ava's expression changed. "Who?" Ethan hesitated. "Daniel." The color drained from her face. That reaction immediately caught his attention. "You know something." Ava looked away. Silence filled the room. "Ava," Ethan said carefully, "what aren't you telling me?" Her eyes filled with fear. "I hoped I was wrong." Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. "Wrong about what?" Ava swallowed. 3 months ago, I found something while organizing old Foundation records." Ethan waited. Someone had been secretly moving money through several charities connected to Blackwell Industries. Money? Laundering? At first, that's what I thought. Ethan leaned forward. "And? The transfers weren't stealing money. Then what were they doing?" Ava closed her eyes. "They were hiding payments." Ethan felt a chill. "Payments to whom?" Ava looked directly at him. "People connected to your father's death." Ethan froze. His father had died 20 years earlier in what authorities called a boating accident. The case had been closed within days. That's impossible. I wish it was. Ethan's mind raced. His father had always been the mystery at the center of his life. There were unanswered questions, missing documents, strange inconsistencies. But no proof, never proof, until now. Did Daniel know? Ethan asked. Ava nodded slowly. I think Daniel was protecting someone. Before Ethan could ask another question, the heart monitor suddenly accelerated. Nurses rushed forward. Doctors ordered him out of the room. Ethan stepped into the hallway as medical staff surrounded Ava. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a physician emerged. She's okay. The stress was too much. She needs rest. Ethan nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. His father's death, hidden payments, Daniel. None of it made sense. That night, Ethan returned to his penthouse. Security had doubled since the assassination attempt. Yet he still felt exposed. Someone had already tried to kill him. Someone powerful enough to manipulate records for decades. Someone desperate enough to silence Ava. As he entered his office, he noticed something unusual. A single envelope rested on his desk. Security had searched the building. Nobody should have been able to enter. Ethan carefully opened it. Inside was an old photograph. His father stood beside two men. One was a younger Daniel Hayes. The other made Ethan's blood run cold. Senator Richard Callaway, one of the most influential politicians in the country. On the back of the photograph, someone had written 6 words in black ink. Your father did not drown. Ethan stared at the message. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Who is this? A distorted voice replied. If you want the truth, stop trusting the police. Ethan's pulse quickened. Who are you? Someone trying to keep you alive. What do you know about my father? The caller paused. Everything. Then tell me. Not over the phone. Where? Another pause. Tomorrow. Midnight. Pier 17. Ethan grabbed a pen. Why should I trust you? The voice answered immediately. Because the same people who killed your father are coming for Ava next. The line went dead. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Across the city, inside a dark warehouse, Daniel Hayes watched security footage of Ethan leaving the hospital. A shadowy figure stood beside him. The girl survived, Daniel said. The figure nodded. Then finish what the shooter started. Daniel's expression hardened. And Ethan? The figure smiled. If he learns the truth, neither of you will survive. The next morning, Ethan barely slept. Every answer seemed to create 10 new questions. His father's death, Daniel's betrayal, the mysterious caller, and now the possibility that Ava was still in danger. He arrived at the hospital before sunrise. Security officers guarded every entrance. Additional cameras had been installed overnight. Ethan personally paid for the extra protection. When he entered Ava's room, he found her awake. She looked exhausted but determined. You shouldn't be here this early, she said. Ethan pulled a chair beside her bed. Someone warned me that you're still a target. Ava's face tightened. Then the caller knows more than we thought. Ethan stared at her. You knew there would be a caller? Ava hesitated. Not specifically, but when I found those financial records, strange things started happening. What kind of things? People following me, emails disappearing, my apartment being searched. Ethan frowned. Why didn't you tell me? Ava gave a sad smile. Because I didn't have proof, and because I didn't want to drag you into something dangerous. Ethan almost laughed at the irony. Ava, someone literally shot you to keep this secret. Before she could respond, a nurse entered with medication. Ethan stepped into the hallway and immediately noticed 2 men standing near the elevators. Both wore dark suits. Both watched him carefully. The moment Ethan looked at them, they turned away. Instinct told him something was wrong. He quietly alerted security. By the time officers reached the elevators, the men were gone. Hours later, Ethan met Detective Morgan again. He showed her the photograph and the note. Morgan examined them closely. Where did you get this? Someone left it in my office. Morgan's expression darkened. This changes everything. Why? She placed the photo on the table. Because Senator Richard Callaway denied ever knowing your father. Ethan stared at her. You're sure? Publicly and privately. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone had been lying for decades. That evening, news exploded with a shocking headline. Daniel Hayes had vanished. His private jet was missing. His home was empty. His phones were disconnected. The man at the center of the investigation had disappeared without a trace. Detective Morgan called immediately. "He's running." Ethan looked out his office window. Or someone helped him disappear. We're considering that possibility. What about Calloway? Morgan hesitated. Be careful mentioning that name. People get nervous. The call ended. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. Powerful people were involved. The kind of people who influenced investigations, elections, and entire industries. The kind of people who didn't leave witnesses behind. As midnight approached, Ethan drove toward Pier 17. Against police advice, he came alone. The abandoned docks stretched into darkness. Waves crashed against rusted steel supports. Fog rolled across the water. Ethan checked his watch. 12 o'clock. Nothing. Then a voice emerged from the shadows. "You came!" Ethan turned sharply. An older man stepped into view. Gray hair, weathered face, nervous eyes. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. "My name is Thomas Reed. Why contact me?" The man's expression became grave. "Because I was there the night your father died." Ethan's heart pounded. "Tell me everything." Thomas looked around before speaking. "Your father didn't drown." Ethan remained silent. "He was murdered." The words hit like a hammer. "By who?" Thomas swallowed hard. "The same people who built their fortunes on his death." Ethan stepped closer. "Names." Thomas opened his mouth to answer. Suddenly, a bright light exploded across the dock. Tires screeched. A black SUV raced toward them. "Run!" Thomas shouted. Gunshots shattered the night. Ethan dove behind a shipping container as bullets struck metal around him. Thomas tried to escape. Another shot rang out. Then another. Ethan looked up just in time to see Thomas collapse onto the concrete. Blood spread beneath him. The SUV sped away into the darkness. Ethan rushed to Thomas's side. The old man struggled to breathe. "Thomas!" Thomas grabbed Ethan's jacket with surprising strength. "Listen carefully. Stay with me." No time. Blood filled his mouth. "Your father found evidence." "Evidence of what?" Thomas coughed violently. "A secret organization?" "What organization?" "People with power. Politicians, CEOs, judges." Ethan leaned closer. "Who leads them?" Thomas forced out his final words. "The founder is." His eyes suddenly widened. Then the strength left his body. Thomas Reed was dead. Ethan sat frozen beside him. The answer had died seconds before reaching him. But then he noticed something in Thomas's hand. A small key. Attached was a faded tag with a single number written on it. 314. Ethan slipped the key into his pocket just as police sirens echoed in the distance. Across the city, inside a heavily guarded mansion, Senator Richard Calloway stood before a fireplace. A security advisor entered. "Thomas Reed is dead." Calloway nodded calmly. "And Ethan Blackwell? Still alive." The senator's expression hardened. "That was your second mistake." The advisor lowered his head. Calloway stared into the flames. "Prepare the archive." "Sir, if Ethan finds locker 314, he'll learn the truth." The advisor looked alarmed. "Should we eliminate him?" Calloway's eyes narrowed. "No." A slow smile appeared on his face. "Bring him to me instead." After all, he lifted an old photograph from the mantel. A photograph showing himself, Daniel Hayes, Ethan's father, and a young child standing beside them. He's family. Ethan barely heard the police sirens as they surrounded the dock. His attention remained fixed on the small brass key in his pocket. Locker 314. Whatever Thomas Reed had died protecting was now the only lead he had. Detective Morgan arrived minutes later and immediately noticed the blood on Ethan's clothes. "What happened?" "He was about to tell me who killed my father." Morgan looked toward Thomas's covered body, and then someone made sure he couldn't. Back at headquarters, investigators searched the area, but Ethan already knew what they would find. Nothing. The shooters had planned the attack perfectly. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no mistakes. The next morning, Ethan skipped every meeting on his schedule. Instead, he drove across the city, searching for any location connected to the key Stoddard facilities. Train stations, old warehouses, banks. Hors passed without success. Then a memory surfaced. When Ethan was a child, his father used to rent private safety deposit boxes at an old downtown bank that no longer existed. The building had later been converted into a secure document archive. Ethan immediately drove there. The archive looked forgotten by time. Dust covered the windows. The sign outside had nearly faded away. Inside, an elderly clerk sat behind a wooden desk. Ethan placed the key on the counter. The clerk's eyes widened. "I haven't seen one of these in years." "What does it open?" The clerk hesitated. "Locker 314. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Can I access it?" The clerk studied him carefully. "Name? Ethan Blackwell." The man's face suddenly changed. Without another word, he stood and led Ethan through a maze of narrow hallways. Finally, they stopped before a steel door. "Locker 310. The clerk handed him the key. "Everything inside belongs to your family." Then he walked away. Alone, Ethan inserted the key. The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside sat a single metal box. Nothing else. Ethan lifted it carefully and carried it to a nearby table. His hands trembled as he opened the lid. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, audio tapes, newspaper clippings, and one leather journal, his father's journal. Ethan opened the first page. "If you are reading this, son, then I am probably dead." The words hit him like a punch. He continued reading. "For years I believed powerful people served the public. I was wrong. I discovered a network operating behind governments, corporations, and financial institutions. They call themselves the Circle." Ethan's heart raced. Page after page described secret meetings, illegal deals, political manipulation, financial crimes, and names. Many names. Some belonged to billionaires. Others belonged to world leaders. At the center of everything appeared one familiar name, Richard Calloway. Ethan's hands tightened around the journal. Then he reached a page that changed everything. "I trusted Richard once. He was like a brother. But when I discovered what the Circle was doing, he made a choice. He chose power over friendship." Ethan turned the page. A photograph fell onto the table. He picked it up. The image showed his father standing beside Richard Calloway. Between them stood a young boy, about 5 years old. The boy looked familiar, very familiar. Ethan stared harder. Then realization struck. The child wasn't him. The child was Daniel Hayes. What? Confusion flooded his mind. Why was Daniel in a family photograph taken years before Ethan ever met him? Ethan flipped through more documents. The answer came quickly. Daniel Hayes wasn't simply Richard Calloway's associate. He was his son. A secret son. The discovery left Ethan speechless. Everything suddenly connected. Daniel's rise inside Blackwell Industries, his access to confidential information, his loyalty to Calloway. None of it had been coincidence. It had been planned for decades. As Ethan continued searching the box, he found a sealed envelope with his name written on it. He opened it immediately. Inside was a handwritten letter from his father. "Ethan, if you have reached this point, then you know Richard betrayed me. But there is one final truth I could never prove. If Richard believes you have found this archive, he will come for you. Do not trust anyone connected to Blackwell Industries. Not even those closest to you. There is only one person you can trust completely. Her name is Ava Carter." Ethan froze. How could his father know Ava? The letter continued. "You do not know it yet, but Ava's mother once saved my life. I promised I would repay that debt someday. If circumstances force Ava and you together, protect her, because she is connected to this story in ways neither of you understand." Ethan lowered the letter slowly. His father had written it over 20 years ago, long before Ava and Ethan ever met. Yet somehow he had predicted her importance before Ethan could process the revelation. His phone rang. Detective Morgan. "Ethan, where are you? Why? You need to leave immediately." Alarm filled her voice. "What happened?" Morgan answered quickly. "Someone just attacked Ava's hospital room." Ethan's blood turned cold. "Is she okay?" "The guards are dead." For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. "Morgan, we don't know if Ava was taken or escaped. The line crackled. Then Morgan spoke the words Ethan feared most. "She's missing." At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, Ava slowly opened her eyes. Her wrists were tied. Her head throbbed. The room was dark, cold, silent. A steel door stood across from her. Footsteps approached from the other side. The lock turned. The door opened. A tall figure entered. Ava's eyes widened in shock, because standing before her was Daniel Hayes, the man everyone believed was running from the law. The man accused of ordering Ethan's assassination. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat down. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked directly into her eyes. "Ava," he said quietly, "if you want Ethan to survive, you need to listen very carefully." Ava stared at Daniel Hayes in disbelief. Every news channel in the country was searching for him. Police considered him a fugitive. Investigators believed he had ordered Ethan's murder. Yet here he was, sitting calmly in front of her. "What do you want?" Ava asked. Daniel studied her for a moment. "To keep Ethan alive." Ava almost laughed. "You're the reason someone shot him." A shadow crossed Daniel's face. "No, that's what the evidence says." The evidence was designed to say that. Ava remained silent. Daniel leaned forward. "Someone wants Ethan to believe I'm the enemy. Then why run? Because the people chasing me control the investigation." Ava looked into his eyes. For the first time, she saw something unexpected: fear. Real fear. The kind worn by a man who knew death was getting closer. Meanwhile, Ethan raced toward the hospital. Police vehicles surrounded the building. Flashing lights illuminated the night. The moment he arrived, Detective Morgan met him outside. There were 6 guards. Ethan already knew the answer. "Dead?" Morgan nodded. "Professional operation." Ethan clenched his fists. "What about cameras?" "They were disabled." "What about witnesses?" "None." Every answer made the situation worse. Then Morgan handed him a small evidence bag. "We found this in Ava's room." Inside was a folded piece of paper. Ethan immediately opened it. 3 words were written in black ink: "Trust no one." His stomach tightened. The exact same message style used by the anonymous source. Someone was communicating with him. Someone who knew far more than they should. Back in the warehouse, Ava watched Daniel carefully. "If you're innocent," she said, "prove it." Daniel reached into his jacket and removed a flash drive. He placed it on the table. "Everything is here." "What is it?" "The truth." Ava frowned. "Then why not give it to the police?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Because half the people investigating this case work for the Circle." Silence filled the room. Finally, Ava asked the question that mattered most. "Why did they try to kill Ethan?" Daniel's expression hardened. "Because he inherited something." "What?" Daniel hesitated. Then he answered, "Control." Ava looked confused. Daniel continued. 20 years ago, Ethan's father discovered a hidden financial network worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Her eyes widened. "What kind of network?" "The kind that controls elections, corporations, governments, wars." Ava felt a chill. "And Ethan inherited it?" "Not intentionally." Daniel nodded toward the flash drive. "The ownership records remained hidden after his father's death." "And now?" "Now the Circle fears Ethan might discover he's the legal heir." Across the city, Ethan sat alone in his office, reviewing his father's journal. Every page revealed another layer of corruption, another secret, another betrayal. Then he noticed something strange. Several pages had been removed, carefully, deliberately. Someone had taken them years ago. As he examined the torn sections, a realization struck him. The missing pages corresponded to specific dates, dates connected to his father's final weeks alive. The most important information was gone. Suddenly, his office door opened. Ethan reached instinctively for the drawer where he kept a firearm, but relaxed when he saw Detective Morgan. "You look terrible," she said. "I feel worse." Morgan placed a folder on his desk. "We identified the vehicle used at the docks." Ethan looked up. "And? It belongs to a security company." "Whose company?" Morgan hesitated, then slid over a photograph. Ethan stared at it. His blood ran cold. The security company belonged to Senator Richard Calloway. At the same moment, inside a luxurious mansion outside Washington, Richard Calloway stood before a massive wall of monitors. One screen displayed Ethan's office. Another showed Detective Morgan leaving the building. A third showed Ava and Daniel inside the warehouse. Calloway smiled. They're finally finding the breadcrumbs. An older woman standing beside him folded her arms. You're letting them get too close. No. Calloway shook his head. I'm leading them exactly where I want them. The woman looked concerned. And if they discover the truth? Calloway's smile disappeared. They won't. You're very confident. For several moments he remained silent. Then he turned toward a locked glass display case. Inside rested dozens of photographs. Among them were pictures of Ethan, Daniel, Ava, and Ethan's father, all taken over many years. The woman noticed them. You've been watching them for decades. Calloway nodded. Longer than they realize. Why? A strange sadness appeared in his eyes. Because none of this was supposed to happen. Before she could ask another question, a security officer entered. Sir, Calloway turned. What is it? The extraction team is ready. Good. The officer hesitated. There is one complication. What? Ethan found locker 314. For the first time that night, Calloway looked genuinely concerned. How much did he see? We don't know. Calloway stared silently into the darkness. Then he spoke. Activate Protocol 7. The officer's face paled. Are you sure? Immediately. After the officer left, the woman stepped closer. Protocol 7? She asked. That's extreme. Calloway's expression became ice cold. If Ethan learns what happened 20 years ago, the circle collapses. And Ava? Calloway looked toward the monitor showing her. She was never supposed to survive the shooting. Far away in the warehouse, Ava suddenly heard an explosion. The entire building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Daniel jumped to his feet. His face lost all color. No. Another explosion echoed outside. Then came gunfire. Lots of gunfire. Daniel rushed to a window and looked out. Ava saw terror fill his eyes. What is it? Daniel slowly turned toward her. They found us. Outside, dozens of black vehicles surrounded the warehouse. Armed men poured into position. Floodlights illuminated the entire property. Ava's heart pounded. Who are they? Daniel grabbed the flash drive and cut the ropes binding her wrists. Then he answered with the last words she wanted to hear. The people who killed Ethan's father. And seconds later, the warehouse doors exploded inward. The warehouse doors blasted apart in a storm of steel and splintered wood. Armed men rushed inside. Gunfire erupted instantly. Daniel grabbed Ava's arm and pulled her behind a stack of shipping crates as bullets ripped through the room. They found us too fast, he muttered. What do we do? Ava shouted. Daniel checked the magazine in his pistol. We survive. Another volley of bullets slammed into the crates. Wood exploded around them. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. The men attacking weren't ordinary criminals. They moved with military precision. Every position coordinated. Every movement planned. This wasn't an arrest. It was an execution. Daniel pointed toward a steel door at the back of the warehouse. There's a tunnel. A tunnel? Built decades ago for smuggling operations. Ava stared at him. You know an awful lot about secret places. Daniel gave a grim smile. You have no idea. Before they could move, a voice echoed through the building. Daniel. The gunfire stopped. Silence followed. The voice came again. You know you can't win. Daniel's expression darkened. Ava noticed genuine hatred in his eyes. Who is that? She whispered. Daniel answered quietly. Marcus Voss. The name meant nothing to Ava. The reaction on Daniel's face meant everything. Who is he? The man who trained me. Ava froze. Daniel continued. The man who taught me how the circle operates. The voice echoed again. Come out, Daniel. No response. I know the girl is alive. Still silence. Marcus laughed. You were always too sentimental. Daniel clenched his jaw, then he grabbed Ava's hand. Run. They sprinted toward the steel door. Gunfire exploded again. Bullets struck the floor behind them. Daniel fired back while Ava reached the door locked. Daniel! He tossed her a keycard. She swiped it. The lock turned green. The door opened. A narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. They disappeared inside. Just as another explosion shook the warehouse. Miles away, Ethan sat in his office, studying the contents of the flash drive recovered from locker 314. His phone rang. Detective Morgan. Ethan. Her voice sounded urgent. What happened? We intercepted communications. From who? The Circle. Ethan stood immediately. What did you find? Morgan hesitated, then said something unexpected. They're moving against Congress. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? It means this is bigger than corruption. How much bigger? Morgan took a breath. The Circle has members in multiple governments. For several seconds, Ethan said nothing. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend. Then Morgan continued. We also found something about Ava. Ethan's pulse quickened. What about her? She wasn't chosen randomly. The room suddenly felt colder. What are you saying? Ava was being watched years before she ever met you. Ethan stared out the window. That's impossible. Apparently not. Morgan opened a file. According to archived surveillance reports, someone started tracking her when she was 11 years old. Ethan felt a chill run through him. Why? We don't know. But somebody did, Dodd. Yes. The call ended. Ethan immediately returned to his father's journal. This time he searched specifically for Ava. Several hours later he found something. A single page near the back. A handwritten note. The Carter family. Protect them. No explanation. No details. Just 4 words. Ethan stared at the page. His father had written it nearly 21 years earlier. Long before Ava entered his life. Long before he even knew her name. A knock interrupted his thoughts. His head of security entered. You need to see this. The man handed him a tablet. A live news broadcast filled the screen. Reporters stood outside Senator Richard Callaway's residence. Breaking news banners flashed across every channel. Federal agents had arrived. Search warrants were being executed. Investigations were expanding. For the first time, public attention was turning toward Callaway. Ethan watched carefully. Then something unusual happened. The senator emerged from his mansion, surrounded by cameras, surrounded by reporters. He walked directly to the microphones and smiled. The reporters began shouting questions. Callaway raised a hand. The crowd fell silent. Then he spoke. I have spent decades serving this country. Questions erupted. He ignored them. There have been many accusations made against me. More shouting. Again he ignored it. Then he looked directly into the nearest camera, into millions of homes, into Ethan's office, and said words that stopped everyone. Ethan Blackwell. Ethan froze. The senator continued. If you're watching this, I think it's time we spoke. The reporters erupted. Callaway remained calm. Your father was my friend. Ethan's heart pounded. And I owe you the truth. The senator reached into his pocket. He removed an old photograph, the same photograph Ethan had discovered earlier, the one showing his father, Daniel, and the senator. Then Callaway revealed the final image hidden behind it. A second photograph. A photograph no one had ever seen. A photograph showing Ethan's father holding a newborn baby. The baby's face was partially visible. The reporters leaned forward. Callaway looked directly into the camera. Then he delivered a sentence that shocked the entire nation. Ethan Blackwell was never his son. Across the country, televisions fell silent. News anchors stopped speaking. Reporters stared in disbelief. And inside the tunnel beneath the warehouse, Ava and Daniel watched the broadcast on a small phone screen. Daniel's face turned white. No. Ava looked at him. You knew? Daniel slowly shook his head. Not this. The tunnel suddenly felt much smaller, much darker, much more dangerous. Because if Callaway was telling the truth, then Ethan's entire life had been built on a lie. And somewhere behind them, growing closer with every second, Marcus Voss and his men were still hunting them. The moment Senator Calloway's statement aired, the world erupted. News networks interrupted every scheduled program. Social media exploded. Financial markets reacted within minutes. One question dominated every headline. If Ethan Blackwell wasn't the son of Jonathan Blackwell, then who was he? Ethan stood motionless in his office. The photograph remained frozen on the screen. His father's face, the newborn child, the implication. Everything he believed about himself suddenly felt uncertain. His phone began ringing non-stop. Bird members, reporters, government officials. He ignored every call. Then another message arrived. Unknown number. One sentence. Don't believe him. 5 seconds later, another message appeared. He's desperate. Then a third. Check the letter again. Ethan immediately pulled out his father's handwritten letter. This time he read every line carefully. Every word. Every comma. Then he noticed something strange. The last page felt thicker than the others. Carefully, he held it toward a lamp. Handwriting appeared beneath the paper. A concealed message. His pulse accelerated. He grabbed a blade and carefully separated the layers. A second note slid free, one that had remained hidden for 20 years. Ethan unfolded it. If Richard ever claims I am not your father, know this. He is lying. He always believed blood mattered more than love. He never understood what makes a family. For several moments, Ethan couldn't breathe. Then he continued reading. The truth is far more dangerous than he realizes. The letter ended with a location, a church, outside Boston, and a date. 20 years ago. Ethan immediately called Detective Morgan. I found something. What? A hidden letter. Does it explain the photograph? Not completely. Morgan was silent. Then she spoke carefully. There's something you should know. What? We ran facial analysis on the baby photo. Ethan waited. The child isn't you. A cold silence filled the room. What are you saying? The baby in Calloway's photograph is someone else. Ethan frowned. Then why show it? Because he wanted everyone to assume it was you. Realization struck instantly. The senator had manipulated the story, not with an outright lie, with a carefully designed misunderstanding. Before Ethan could respond, alarms suddenly sounded throughout the building. His security chief burst into the office. We have a problem. What happened? The man looked pale. Our systems have been breached. Ethan stood. By who? The answer came from every monitor in the room simultaneously. The screens flickered, then switched to a single image. Marcus Voss, the same man hunting Ava and Daniel. He stared directly into the camera. Good evening, Ethan. The room fell silent. Marcus smiled. You've been very difficult to kill. Ethan's security team rushed to disconnect the network. Nothing worked. Marcus remained on every screen. I thought your father would teach you something. Ethan's eyes narrowed. You knew him. Marcus laughed. Knew him? He shook his head. I buried him. The room went still. Even the security officers stopped moving. Marcus leaned closer. That's right. Ethan felt rage surge through him. You killed my father. No. Marcus smiled again. I merely followed orders. Ethan clenched his fists. Whose orders? Marcus's smile faded. Ask Richard. The screens went black. Meanwhile, deep beneath the city, Ava and Daniel continued through the tunnel. Hours had passed. Neither had spoken much. Finally, Ava broke the silence. Why does Calloway care so much about Ethan? Daniel kept walking. Because Ethan was never supposed to survive. Ava stopped. What? Daniel turned toward her. The night Jonathan Blackwell died, there were 2 children. Ava's heart raced. 2? Daniel nodded. One disappeared. Who? Daniel's expression darkened. No one knows. The tunnel opened into an abandoned subway station. Dust covered everything. Rust lined the tracks. Daniel led Ava toward an old maintenance room. Inside sat computers. Maps sims. Years of hidden research. A secret safe house. Ava stared in amazement. You built all this? Daniel nodded. I've been preparing for years. For what? For the day the circle turned on me. He opened a cabinet and removed several folders. One contained photographs. Hundreds of them. Ava flipped through the images, then stopped. Her eyes widened. Every photograph showed her. Different ages, different locations, school, college, work, even childhood birthdays. Someone had been watching her entire life. Ava felt sick. Why? Daniel looked uncomfortable. I don't know, she pointed at the photos. Someone does. Daniel slowly opened another folder. Inside was a single birth certificate. Ava grabbed it. The moment she read the name, the color drained from her face. No, Daniel nodded grimly. I was afraid of that. The document listed a different mother, a different father, different records, different history. Everything Ava knew about herself was wrong. She looked up. This isn't possible. I'm sorry. Ava's hands trembled. Who am I? Daniel answered quietly. The same question Ethan is asking. At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, Ethan arrived at the old church mentioned in his father's hidden letter. The building sat alone beneath a gray sky, abandoned, forgotten. The date carved into the stone matched the letter exactly. Ethan entered cautiously. Dust covered the pews. Sunlight filtered through broken stained glass. At first glance, the church appeared empty. Then he noticed a wooden box beneath the altar, waiting, as if someone expected him. Ethan opened it. Inside lay an old cassette tape, a photograph, and a sealed envelope. The envelope carried his father's handwriting. Ethan, if you found this, then Richard has begun rewriting history. Do not let him succeed. The cassette contains a confession, not mine. His. Ethan stared at the tape, his heart pounding. Because if the recording was authentic, it could destroy Richard Calloway forever. But before he could play it, a voice echoed from the church entrance. You shouldn't have come alone. Ethan turned. His blood ran cold. Standing in the doorway was Richard Calloway himself, and behind him stood armed men, at least 20 of them. The senator slowly stepped forward, his expression calm, almost sad. Then he spoke. Hello, Ethan. He glanced at the cassette in Ethan's hand. Your father always was stubborn. The armed men surrounded the church, barricading every exit. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Ethan realized something terrifying. Richard Calloway had never been running from him. He had been hunting him. Richard Calloway stood in the center of the church as armed men sealed every exit. Ethan gripped the cassette tape tightly. For a moment, neither man spoke. 20 years of secrets hung between them. Finally, Richard sighed. You look just like him. My father? Ethan asked. Richard nodded. Jonathan never knew when to stop digging. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you had him killed. The senator looked away. For the first time, genuine regret crossed his face. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Then tell me what happened. Richard stared at the stained glass windows. Jonathan discovered the circle. I know. He wanted to expose everything. I know. Richard closed his eyes. And if he had succeeded, powerful people would have destroyed millions of lives protecting themselves. Ethan laughed bitterly. So murder was your solution? No. Richard's voice cracked slightly. It was theirs. The church fell silent. Then Richard revealed the truth. 20 years earlier, the Circle had voted to eliminate Jonathan Blackwell. Richard opposed the decision. He tried to save his friend. But Marcus Voss and several other leaders ignored him. They carried out the assassination anyway. After Jonathan's death, Richard secretly protected Ethan from the same fate. For years, from a distance. Watching, waiting, trying to keep him alive, Ethan struggled to process it. You expect me to believe you? No. Richard pointed toward the cassette. Listen to the recording. Before Ethan could react, gunfire erupted outside. Everyone froze. Another burst followed. Then screaming, one of the armed guards rushed inside. Sir, Richard turned. What is it? The guard looked terrified. It's Marcus. Chaos exploded. Bullets shattered the church windows. Glass rained across the floor. Marcus Voss and dozens of heavily armed mercenaries stormed the property. The circle was turning on itself. Richard immediately drew a weapon. Get Ethan out of here. The battle began. Gunfire echoed through the church. Men fell on both sides. Smoke filled the air. Ethan ducked behind a stone pillar as bullets tore through the walls. Outside, vehicles burned. Sirens wailed in the distance. Then a familiar voice shouted his name. Ethan! He looked toward the rear entrance. Ava, Daniel. They had found him. Relief washed over him. Only for a second. A sniper hidden outside fired. The shot was aimed directly at Ethan. Everything happened in an instant. Ava saw it. Without hesitation, she ran toward him. Agon, the bullet struck her shoulder. She collapsed. Eva. Ethan rushed to her side. Blood stained her jacket. But she was alive. The wound wasn't fatal. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. You did it again. Ava managed a weak smile. Told you, someone has to keep saving you. Nearby, Daniel engaged Marcus's men. The firefight intensified. Then Marcus himself entered the church calm, confident, dangerous. Bodies surrounded him. He looked directly at Richard. So this is how it ends. Richard raised his weapon. It should have ended 20 years ago. Marcus smiled. It almost did. Then he pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the church. Richard staggered backward. Blood spread across his chest. For a second, nobody moved. Then Richard fired back. His final shot struck Marcus directly in the heart. Marcus collapsed, dead before he hit the floor. The leader of the conspiracy was gone. Richard fell moments later. Ethan reached him just as his strength faded. The senator looked up at him. I'm sorry. Ethan remained silent. Richard's eyes filled with tears. Tell your father. I tried. Those were his final words. Then he was gone. Hours later, federal agents flooded the property. Documents recovered from Richard's private archives, and Daniel's evidence exposed the circle completely. Politicians resigned. Executives were arrested. Criminal networks collapsed. The organization that had operated in the shadows for decades finally fell. Weeks passed, then months. The world slowly moved forward. Ava recovered fully. Daniel cooperated with authorities and helped dismantle what remained of the circle. For the first time in years, he was free. And Ethan finally listened to the cassette. The recording confirmed everything. Richard's role, Marcus's betrayal, Jonathan Blackwell's murder. The truth, the world heard it too. Jonathan's name was cleared, his legacy restored. 1 year later, Ethan stood beside Ava at the dedication ceremony for a new foundation. Not one built on wealth, not one built on power, but one built on second chances. The same kind of second chance Jonathan Blackwell had once given Ava's family. As guests filled the courtyard, Ethan looked at Ava. You know, he said, smiling, most people only save someone's life once. Ava laughed. You're unusually difficult to keep alive. For the first time in a long time, everything felt peaceful. No secrets, no conspiracies, no shadows. Just sunlight, hope, and the people who had fought to protect one another when it mattered most. The crowd applauded as the foundation officially opened. Ethan looked up toward the sky, thinking of his father, thinking of everyone lost along the way, and knowing that despite all the darkness, the truth had survived, because courage had survived, because kindness had survived, and because one woman had stepped into the path of a bullet, not for power, not for money, but for another human being. The future began that day, and this time, nobody was hiding from it.